now from West Asia into the Eurasian politics, and how aggressively both in economic and in foreign policy it is projecting itself.
So what India is saying or signaling also came from a platform where India was not alone,
which in fact hit their nadir following the Galwan crisis, that they have imposed on any other friendly nation of theirs, and India being the indispensable partner in the Indo-Pacific.
As far as two important positions of Dipsang and Demchuk is concerned, we have already done this.
India would like to participate in repairing the order, resurrecting an order, and India certainly has, committed to a rules-based order. That doesn't change because a certain US president currently.
So basically the point we are trying to make with US is that we are not going to succumb to their pressure tactics of imposition of these tariffs. Rather, India has doubled on the effort of emphasizing on strategic autonomy.
Hello everyone, I am Vishal Salsekar, and today in this perspective discussion, we are going to discuss regarding the recent SCO summit. Now the SCO summit that was held in China, Tianjin, this was significant specifically in the context of the US trade tariffs, because US has added the additional secondary sanctions on India. Now in this particular context, we have to discuss that what are the significance of this summit from the India's perspective and how it can pave the way for an alternative global order. So to discuss this entire topic, I am joined by the fellow faculty members of Vision IAS. Hello everyone.
Hello sir.
Shruti ma'am, if we talk about the SCO, that conceptualization was done in 1996 in the form of Shanghai 5, and then 2001 it became a formalized organization. Since then, a lot of expansion has also taken place, and the summit is also going on every year basis. Then why at this point of time this summit is very, very significant from the India's perspective?
Okay. So sir, in order to explain this idea, I would like to take the audience to exactly what is the geostrategic choke points right now in the world politics. So definitely we all know that there has been a shift of focus from Indo-Pacific to West Asia, keeping into mind the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Right.
But I strongly believe that this SCO meet has again reorientated the focus now from West Asia into the Eurasian politics. So number one, what is most important thing which is happening is now the geostrategic focus point has again shifted to Eurasia. That has been before also when Russia-Ukraine crisis was ongoing, but in between the focus shifted to West Asian politics. So this is the first important idea. Second, I strongly believe, sir, that keeping into mind, as you said, that everything needs to be seen in the backdrop of what US is taking and how aggressively both in economic and in foreign policy it is projecting itself. So keeping that thing into mind, I believe that SCO is also exhibiting the power and the relevance of multipolarity. It is showcasing that how countries can also integrate in their own unique regional space. It can also provide an alternative to the US order, which US is perceiving that it's going to create.
Exactly.
Another thing, I believe that it is quite an eye-opening for the global South countries also, wherein how beautifully India has refused to succumb itself within the pressures of the trade tariffs which US have made, and how beautifully India have even exhibited that yes, being the leaders of global South, India can take forward multi-alignment as well as strategic autonomy. So I believe that all these ideas needs to be witnessed, and within this backdrop only the SCO summit appears to be very, very relevant this time.
Exactly. Anjani sir, in this context only, right now as ma'am has highlighted that the geopolitical focus was previously, 2-3 months back, it was shifted towards the West Asia when the Israel and the Iran conflict was going on. But again, when the Trump is again and again reiterating that India's purchase of oil from Russia, and I think that in that case also it has to be examined, this recent SCO summit. So what is your opinion about this?
Vishal, there is no question of opinion on that. There is, the optics is clear. When US is taking a position which is not liked by India, it is not necessarily that we respond to them in their own language. We can do it by signaling subtly. So when India's Prime Minister stands at a platform with other heads of states, specifically Russian head of state, Chinese head of state. That in itself is a statement, and that can be seen in terms of how the US media has covered it. So it was noticeable. And second thing is, as ma'am has also mentioned, multipolarity and strategic autonomy as two consistent principles that India adopts. So that is visible. Where one thing is noticeable, that this was the largest SCO summit, being the 25th, and 24 heads of states level personalities were there at the summit. So what India is saying or signaling also came from a platform where India was not alone, where India, in a sense, was standing with multiple other countries which are not so comfortable with how US would like to run its own foreign policy, but desires to run international relations. So that is something that we can notice at this SCO summit.
So, Ayushi ma'am, a few months before this particular SCO summit, it was not at all clear that whether the Prime Minister Modi is going to take participation in this summit. But after that, the world order has changed, and now we are seeing that the Prime Minister Modi, along with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, was standing on the SCO podium. So, what do you see? Like, what was the significance of this particular SCO summit from the perspective of India?
Yes, Vishal, of course, there were speculations that whether Prime Minister Modi is going to attend the SCO summit, which was held in China this year. Given the state of generally tensed relation that we have had with China, which in fact hit their another following the Galwan crisis. Yes, but there has been the thaw that happened in October last year during the Kazan summit of BRICS, where you find that we entered into an agreement with China as far as a disengagement at Depsang and Demchok, the two remaining choke points between India and China were concerned along the borders. So you find what has happened as far as India-China relations is concerned, you find that the continuation of thaw. Of course, it is not symbolic of the ties moving into a phase of warmth, because the structural issues as far as India and China are concerned remains. Yes, the issue of border dispute has not been resolved. We have just gone for a disengagement, the de-induction and de-escalation. So there were three-step process. First was a disengagement, where the soldiers would no longer be at eyeball to eyeball. The next one would be de-escalation. Yes, where the soldiers would return to the forward lines, and then there would be de-induction, where the soldiers, the forces, their numbers would be reduced along the border. So that process, which started in October 2024, you find that the relations are almost there. We have, however, spoken about the trade deficit that is quite significant. In the past 20 years, we find that substantial increase in the trade deficit between India and China, from 1.1 billion to $99 billion, which is quite significant. Yes, we have also spoken about resumption of direct flights. We have seen that Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has resumed. So yes, whatever is there, whatever we can do at this point of time with China, whatever engagement we can have, we continue with that. Yes, when it comes to next important country, of course, on the SCO platform is Russia. As far as Russia is concerned, once again, government has made it clear against the US tariffs, which they have imposed at 50%, which is one of the highest reciprocal tariffs plus the penalty tariffs that they have imposed on any other friendly nation of theirs, and India being the indispensable partner in the Indo-Pacific. So despite those tariffs, we stand firm in our relations with Russia. It is and continues to be a very important strategic partner. We continue to emphasize on the special and privileged strategic relation we have with Russia, despite India going for diversification of its defense. So basically, the point we are trying to make with US is that we are not going to succumb to their pressure tactics of imposition of these tariffs. Rather, India has doubled on the effort of emphasizing on strategic autonomy. So by engaging with China and Russia, we are symbolizing to US that yes, India continues firm on its stand of protecting its strategic autonomy, while we would like to engage with US as well. Yes, and the next major optics that comes out from the SCO summit is the emphasis on SCO itself, because as you mentioned, there were speculations whether Indian Prime Minister would travel to China this time, because if we can recall, going back the past two summits that have taken place in June 2023, India had hosted the SCO summit. Yes, once again, that time though India was the host of the summit, and we went ahead in September and hosted with grand furor the G20 summit, but we chose to only virtually host the SCO summit. Yes, maybe it was because of the optics of Iran joining SCO, which would be an anti-West move by the SCO, but whatever that reason might have been, we chose to not go for a physical summit of SCO. Also, last year you find that Indian Prime Minister did not travel, did not physically attend the SCO summit. On his behalf and as a representative of India, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar represented India. So this time, once the Indian Prime Minister himself has chosen to be there on the SCO platform representing India, it symbolizes that we are re-emphasizing, we are reasserting the importance of SCO as a platform itself. If we might just recall, the primary goal of SCO has been to fight the triple evils of extremism, separatism and terrorism. But you find this time around, or over the years, SCO has emerged as an important platform when it comes to global trade talks. Yes, vis-a-vis global governance, vis-a-vis connectivity, it has emerged as a very important forum. So it is in this perspective also we can see that yes, this summit where Indian Prime Minister participated is very, very important from the perspective of what we are signaling vis-a-vis our relations vis-a-vis China, Russia and US, India's emphasis on strategic autonomy, India continuing its policy of multiple alignment to safeguard its strategic autonomy, and secondly, India betting on SCO itself. So that is what I think so is the significance of this very important organization for that matter.
And in that manner, Shruti ma'am, there has been a discussion regarding the resolution of the border conflict between India and China. So there has been discussion with the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji regarding this resolution and the continuation of the talks in this particular manner. So what do you think, like what was the basic discussion that was done in this context? What was the significance of that in this particular meeting?
Okay, so as far as the three-stage border roadmap is concerned, this was quite before only finalized between India and China, and I believe this was also in the earlier SCO summit, wherein on the behest of Russia probably there was some kind of synergy between India and China on this regard. So a three-stage roadmap we have created, wherein the third stage would of course be disengagement. This will lead to de-escalation, and finally it would be de-induction. And this means definitely we will go back to the pre-Galwan positioning as far as our troops are concerned, especially eyeball situations हम prevent करेंगे, so that some kind of the trust deficit which is happening might somehow slow down. Sir, I personally feel that as far as this particular summit is also concerned, we again discussed about this idea. As far as two important positions of Dipsang and Demchuk is concerned, we have already done this. But definitely I would not say that the border issues are so deep, they are so entrenched, that I don't think that a single multilateral forum like SCO can help us navigate across this issue. And definitely India is always taking forward an idea that things should always be resolved at bilateral level. Even we would not be very happy if our bilateral issues are discussed at a multilateral forum. But again, as I discuss in the class also, that what is the beauty of these multilateral institutions, be it BRIC, SCO, be it Quad or any kind of multilateral organization, the beauty is that even the warring countries at least come up, sit. At least that kind of discomfort which they are having, like ma'am also said, after almost 7 years, our Prime Minister had a meeting. He went to China after approximately 7 years, and this was the only big G2G engagement, especially 2020 Galwan Valley skirmish. So the significance is not that we are close in solving the border issue. That is a bilateral issue that has to be solved at bilateral level. But the significance is that at least after such long time, we sat.
Yes.
And more, like ma'am also said, it was more a symbolic thing which we wanted to give a signal to US. Let's see, India is all ready with all the alternatives, and this is not the time that we are going to succumb into any such kind of pressure. So I believe it was more a symbolic rather than a deterministic step as far as our border disputes are concerned.
So at least we started discussion about
Yeah,
it, which was
that was
stalled
a
after
good
the
start,
Galwan.
I would say.
Right. So Anjani sir, post this particular Pahalgam terror attack, and after that India's launching of Operation Sindoor, this was the first time where the India's Prime Minister and the Pakistani Prime Minister were also not meeting, but yes, they were like face to each other. And this meeting of SCO also talked about the terrorism, also talked about connectivity. And when it comes to India-Pakistan relation, also these particular two issues are very significant, whether CPEC or whether any other thing. So, what do you think? Like, what was the stand of SCO vis-a-vis terrorism as well as the connectivity?
So, on these two issues, primarily if you look at SEO, it is a platform where the primary benefit is that we get to express our views, which reiterates our position. So, if you look at the history of SEO, one thing at the general level, condemnation of terrorism has been part of a series of SEO declarations, including Tianjin. At the specific level, the mention of Pahalgam, condemnation of Pahalgam attack, and the appeal for the perpetrators to be brought to justice is something that India appreciated. The double standards in dealing with terrorism is something that this particular summit declaration also mentioned. So there is an overlap in terms of what India wants to say, what India wants to be seen done. But when we look at specific issues, for example, SEO works on consensus. So specifically name calling Pakistan, is it possible at SEO? It's not possible. So general overlap in terms of issues is there, it is visible there, but specifically addressing it in the context of, let's say, Pakistan being a problem is not possible at SEO. So we need to understand that limitation of SEO as well. On connectivity, again, over the years, India has been highlighting that connectivity is welcome, but connectivity at what cost? If connectivity violates territorial integrity or sovereignty as principles, that is not acceptable. So this is a position that India has been taking. Now again, in this summit also what we see is India wants to pursue connectivity as a key issue in this region, digital, physical, all manners of connectivity. India would like to synergize its efforts with individual countries at SCO also. So be it INSTC, be it Chabahar, these are projects of interest of India in this region. But when we look at the particular issue of BRI, historically it has been the case that India has opted out of that clause of the declaration which endorses BRI. All other members of SCO have been endorsing BRI. India has clearly opted out of it. So again, at the general principle level, connectivity is something that India welcomes. But on the particular level, the way China has pursued BRI, India has differences with the members. So we see this continuing in this summit also. So again, this displays the maturity of India's diplomacy, that we look at the platforms for what they primarily can deliver rather than looking at them from a rigid standpoint that they should deliver everything that we want, right? So it's like choosing horses for courses, and this is something that happened at this SCO also. Many of our points reflected in the declaration, on many points we had differences.
Exactly. So that connectivity and the terrorism were the two major things. But apart from that, one more significant thing that was discussed in this summit is the civilizational dialogue. So, Ayushi ma'am, if you can highlight that what was discussed in this particular context that we are talking, because whether it is the country like Russia, whether it is China, or whether it is India, we are the civilizational countries, right? So, what significantly was discussed in this particular summit?
Yes, there are other important takeaways as well. Yes, there are important takeaways as far as India's stand on, say, terrorism is concerned. We have reiterated our stand there, uh, that we would want a tough language as far as terrorism is concerned. Once again, there was a change I would just like to mention. Previously, there was the SCO meeting at the defense ministers level where there could not be a joint statement which we could agree upon. That was because they would not agree to the mention of the Pahalgam terrorist attack. But this time around, you find that that correction has been done. There is mentioning of Pahalgam terrorist attack along with the terror attacks that have happened in Balochistan. Fine. So there is a balancing act we have on the part of SEO, but at least our concern of terrorism has been in some sort addressed by referring to and condemning such terrorist attacks. Yes, and also vis-a-vis the BRI that we see once again a significant language, India emphasizing that while connectivity is very important, but it has the sovereignty of nations need to be respected.
So, with due permission of my esteemed faculty, I would just like to summarize what all we said. Actually, SEO needs to be understood for our students. I am saying just remember within SEO, the SEO acronym. That is, the three important things which were discussed was security. And when we talk about security, it means, like Sir said, non-negotiable stand of India over terrorism, and also the double standards on which terrorism China and Pakistan has been showing. This is the first S. C stands for connectivity. So within this SCO summit, the most important idea which we discussed was connectivity, wherein we have understood our vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are that Chabahar port right now is problematic because of Iran's involvement in it. And INSTC is problematic, or it's still into pipeline because of Russia's over-obsession in its backyard. When we understand this is our vulnerability, let's focus on alternative connectivity initiative. Especially when Sir said that BRI is very active here. This is the reason now in this summit, India stood forward with certain connectivity alternatives, like let's create a land route across Lipu Lake, let's re-explore Nathula, let's re-explore Shipkala, let's re-explore the Sitwell road land route across Myanmar. So this is the C acronym. And the O acronym stands for opportunity. So this time, SCO offered an opportunity for India, like ma'am said, to explore the civilizational connect. So we came forward with this idea of civilizational dialogue forum. And I strongly believe it was a very fine move, because somehow indirectly we again created a parallel narrative as far as China's GCI initiative is concerned. तो स्टूडेंट्स को मैं रिमाइंड कराऊंगी, there are three forward looking initiatives of China. One is GDI, another is GSI, and third is GCI, wherein the Arab peace plan is one of the example. So see how beautifully we had tried to put forward our claims also, and how beautifully one by one we have created an alternative to either China or US hegemony in this region. So exactly, if our student understand this, so I believe that could be a very nice idea, and of course a very fine move in soft diplomacy we played. So this SCO needs to be remembered, so India का stake समझ में आएगा अच्छे से.
And not to forget that when we are talking about the civilization, we do have the civilization which followed the ancient Silk Route also.
Yeah.
So that particular
Yes,
Silk
yes,
Route was
definitely.
a kind of common connecting link between all the countries which we are talking about as far as the SCO is concerned. So that can also pave the way for certain bonhomie, not that kind of cooperation that we want, but yes, to some extent it can be the initiation of that kind of connectivity project. So Anjani sir, now when we are talking about that, on the one side President Donald Trump is putting pressure on India vis-a-vis like the trade that we are doing as far as the oil trade is concerned with Russia. On the other hand, we have participated in this particular summit, and the kind of discussions, dialogues, and the images that emerged after that particular summit, that reflects that some amount of cooperation that has started between the India and China also post Pahalgam terror attack and the Operation Sindoor, and also reaffirming the solidarity with the Russia that we are having. So what do you think, like, is it changing of the world order, or is it like the continuation of the similar thing that was already going on?
So both, there is no contradiction between them. So there is always continuity going along with change. Change is never abrupt or seldom abrupt. in international relations, especially in the matter of orders. Order emerges over a long period of time. So what we see is, a, let's dissect it. So when we are dealing with China, we understand that it stands over the foundation of very fundamental differences: unresolved border issues, the surplus capacity of China, the trade deficit that we have with China. So it's more tactical in nature, and it would depend on whether China changes its perspective or not. The Chinese have been operating on the basis of certain superiority complex, which basically rides on an inferiority complex, which is reflected in how Xi Jinping time and again refers to the century of humiliation. So again, it would depend on whether China changes or not, whether China is willing to accommodate India's sensitivities or not. So it is more tactical, looking at what is happening in other parts of the world. With Russia, it is more strategic. There is no question that we have deeper stakes in our relations with Russia, and the United States putting pressure on us, or some statements coming in public would never mean that we would compromise on our relations with Russia. That is more strategic in nature. The third thing, that interesting part about the dialogue on civilization, as we are talking about, again, there I would like to point out that if we look at India, and students should read widely, for example, William Dalrymple in his recent book has brought attention to the fact that this whole mythology about Silk Route being a Chinese dominated route is a myth, not a reality. Now, India as a large country, large civilization since the ancient time, had those connectivity with this region. So again, it is also about India reclaiming that space. India is a Eurasian country. We should not forget that. It started seeming like it's only China or it's only Russia, but India is a Eurasian country. India has had those linkages. So again, when the question of order comes, it's not only what kind of order, which is very clear, India wants a multipolar order, but also what is the way of bringing about that order. So for China, it would be destroying the existing order to resurrect an order which reflects its interests. For India, that is not the case. India would like to participate in repairing the order, resurrecting an order, and India certainly has committed to a rules-based order. That doesn't change because a certain US president currently, for his own individual reasons or imperatives, has taken a particular stand. So again, India standing at SCO, standing with Russia, standing with China, stands for a lot of things, right? And it is reflective of how India has searched for diversification of options. It doesn't want a world where one alliance is pitted against another alliance. That has not changed, right? So again, India tries to take upon the opportunity where conversations can happen. But the red lines, specifically regarding China, are also very clear. That is something that we should remember. And again, there is a strategic view and there is a tactical view. That is also something that we should differentiate.
Right.
So I would like to add from this particular thing that now overall how we are watching SCO and especially this particular summit. Point number one, I would like to suggest and tell my students that now SCO has come up as a very fine, viable, I would say a fundamental actor in this entire idea of multipolarity. And multipolarity, we all know, has become very essential, especially when US again have started exhibiting its aggressiveness. Secondly, I would like to say that SCO this time has emerged out from its very narrow idea of it being just another intergovernmental body which was concerned about terrorism, especially when SCO is having SCO rat mechanism in Tashkent. This time what SCO has adopted, that is its stand on terrorism, is actually making SCO come out from that narrow image. Third, I would like to suggest that coming out from that narrow image, now SCO is exhibiting itself into so many different ideas, especially being connectivity. And here I would again say that the beauty is that this time this SCO summit is completely overlapping with India's fundamental foreign policy idea in its own neighborhood also, that is also connectivity. So these are few of the ways in which we can figure out that there is a very fine, good overlap of what India aspires in its neighborhood and what SCO is also taking forward. But at the same time, sir, I would like to take this as an opportunity to highlight few of the dilemmas. So the first dilemma is that as far as SCO stand on terrorism is concerned, like sir was also saying, we really need to figure out whether this is just a rhetoric or it's really a reality check. Because keeping into mind SCO being a consensus driven intergovernmental organization where you are having China and Pakistan as iron brothers, are we really serious within SCO to take forward a very strong stand towards terrorism or not? So this we need to give ourselves also a reality check. Second, at the same time, I strongly feel that within SCO, traditionally also, it's not that this time, traditionally India has always been facing this kind of complex of somehow being relegated to the secondary leadership position. So whether this SCO summit has helped us gain back that position, but I again would open it and leave it for my students to understand that here we need to figure out that how closely China and Russia are working. So really, are we taking forward a leadership to another level, or we are still struggling with the same security idea and this leadership dilemma? Third, I would strongly again say that within SCO, sir, no doubt we are exhibiting our multi-alignment, we are flaunting our strategic autonomy idea, but we definitely know that this foreign policy is coming up with a great diplomatic dilemma for India. Because you can't say that US is less important. It will, and it will always be important for us, especially when SCO have countries like Russia and Iran, which clearly makes it an anti-West forum. We really are now in this strategic dilemma, that how to calibrate this strategic balancing. So now future will tell us whether we were able to position ourselves and strategically balance our relation. In the end, I would just like to end that at this particular moment within SCO and even outside SCO, what India needs to do, India needs to carry forward its multi-alignment, continue your strategic autonomy, but at the same time, don't be complacent, and we should always be very cautious. So a cautious approach, incremental approach, value-based idea for which we are standing should always be the USP of our foreign policy.
Right. So India's foreign policy is in dilemma because on one side it is the RIC tripolarity
Yes.
that India is facing, and on the other hand managing the relations with United States, because considering that United States, since the India's nuclear test, became a significant partner in the trade and the otherwise.
And so we also should understand that Indo-Pacific is one region where we are finding the convergence of India and US. And Indo-Pacific as a region for some time has been out from the focus. We understand, as I discussed, that the focus shifted from Indo-Pacific to West Asia, from West Asia to Eurasia, then again back to Eurasia. But we should never forget that Indo-Pacific is a region where we want US partnership to come up. Quad will and always be the force for good for which we are always being taking forward. So, kitna US ke saath we have to continue the strategic balance. Now this is up to us.
Right.
That's what I want to say.
So Ayushi ma'am, your final take on this, that Prime Minister Modi first went to Japan and then for the SCO summit in China. So like how India is managing its foreign policy now?
Yes, Vishal, you find that as far as India's foreign policy approach is concerned, we see a great deal of continuity. Continuity in the sense that we emphasize on strategic autonomy. And strategic autonomy in a multipolar world can only be achieved through multiple alignment. So despite the pressures that might be put on India, India is not one of those who would succumb to it. That is what we are trying to tell the US, and we are carrying forward our strategic autonomous approach where we are trying to engage with multiple important global partners. So this continues to be our approach. While Prime Minister Modi has attended the SCO summit, we are going to host the Quad summit this year. So you find that India continues to showcase that balance. But of course, this time the a very important picture that came out and that became the talking point out of the SCO was this trilateral handshake between Indian Prime Minister, Chinese President and Putin, the Russian President. So it did remind us of the RIC trilateral, But we find that yes, though we emphasize on our relations with China and Russia, each has its limitation. Similarly, though we have been very enthusiastic about India-US relations since, as you mentioned, the nuclear test, Operation Shakti by India, you find that once again there are constraints in the relation that we need to be mindful. Right now we have President Trump in power in Russia, in US. So let's see how things develop. But what we do see from our foreign policy perspective is that India continues to emphasize on strategic autonomy in this multipolar world. That we cannot compromise. That has been India's stand since independence. Yes, so in a bipolar world, it is through non-alignment, and in a multipolar world, it is through multiple alignment.
Right. So I think we have very well discussed about this particular topic, where the key takeaways for India is the strategic autonomy, keeping in mind that right now the present world order is the multipolar world order, where there will be multiple powers that are deciding that in what way the world should be moving. We can't ignore United States because United States is a significant partner. At the same time, the world is changing, the power priorities are also changing. So in that way, the rick trilateral that we have discussed about is also very, very significant. And if India want to assert its strategic autonomy, India should not lay all the eggs in the same basket. So that is the key takeaway from the perspective of moving forward with the foreign policy of India. So thank you everyone again for joining me for this particular discussion and
Thank you so
making
much.
the discussion very much enriching. Thank you
Thank
everyone.
you.
So students, with this we are concluding this enriching discussion regarding the SCO summit. For more such videos, stay tuned. Thank you.